Welcome to The Real and the Woo. I'm your host, Laurie Stern. Join me as I invite experts and friends to discuss a range of topics, from the factual and practical to the mystical and magical. Consider this your virtual happy hour filled with lively, authentic, and meaningful conversations meant to inform, inspire, and ignite your curiosity. Whether you are very real or super woo, this podcast is just for you. Welcome to The Real and the Woo. I'm your host, Laurie Stern, and I'm with my cousin, Cindy Changyit Levin, who I am pleased is my cousin because if she were not someone in my family, I would hope that she was in my family because she's so freaking cool with all she does and all she's managed to do and all I know that she is going to be doing, not just for herself, but for all of us globally. Just a magic human. And so I'm going to set you up a little bit. I'm going to read from my notes, which I do sometimes because I'm supposed to be professional. Cindy, is the author of her first book called From Changing Diapers to Changing the World, Why Moms Make Great Advocates and How to Get Started. Love that title. She's been active in the advocacy world since her children were very small, and she advocates on a number of bipartisan issues with her main focus on global health. And Cynthia has a bachelor's and master's degree in mechanical engineering and shares how her STEM background helped her as she moved into her advocacy career. And in addition, she's a rare breed of nonpartisan activists who work across a variety of issues. And she coaches volunteers of all ages, I love that, to build productive relationships with members of Congress and probably local school districts, city governments, and so forth. And she advocates side by side with her amazing children. And I would imagine my wonderful cousin and her husband. And she's crafted a new approach to advocacy based on her strength as a mother. So we're going to get right into that. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Might be more of the real than the woo, but here we are.
Oh no, we're gonna get to the woo. I always have a way of sprinkling that in. Don't you worry about it. So I wanted to start with your journey as a mom and how that ultimately launched you into advocating. And I want you to talk about if there was a precipitating moment, for example, as a mom that inspired you to get active and in what way?
Yeah, I would love to say that everything is perfectly linear, but life is not. It's messy. But there was a spark of awareness for me just 4 days really early into my motherhood when my newborn at home was not thriving. And I wanted to do everything right. You said that I was an engineer, so I like to follow the rules and do things the right way. So I was going to breastfeed the heck out of that baby. And I didn't know at the time that I'm a person that it takes a while for my breast milk to come in. It was coming, but it needed a little time. So it was Christmas Eve, and I called up my doctor, and I was like, I don't know what's going on. No wet diapers, and the little soft spot on the baby's head was like being the sink. And the doctor was like, listen to everything that was going on. It's like, listen, your baby's not getting enough nutrients. So effectively, she told me that the baby was starving, but all I had to do was go out to the convenience store and get some formula, mix it with some water, and things would be okay, and my milk would come in. And that is exactly what happened. So my husband and I got to see, and credit to him, he's the one that went out in the snow in Chicago. We got to see what happens when a simple intervention of formula and water can do. And for folks out there, I'm not saying don't breastfeed. I am saying do breastfeed, but some of us need a little boost now and then. And so I saw this incredible turnaround, but it started that thinking in me. What happens if you don't have clean water? What happens if you do need formula longer and you don't have the money for it? What happens? And in your mind, a lot of times you think about like, oh, hunger bad. And, oh, I should donate because my temple or my church or the local grocery store is collecting. But I think that is the point where it just really hit me, like how deeply distressing this is and how that would tear me apart if I couldn't provide for my child. And I started thinking about other moms around the world. Another family member of ours, and I honestly cannot remember who it was, gave me a CD of lullabies from around the world.
Oh,
Yeah, and I would listen to it at night, and there were languages that I didn't understand. But in listening to these, you understand that universal notion of caring for. And there was one particular song that starts with just one woman singing, and then a chorus comes around it. And I started thinking about, could I be, this chorus of caring that could help a woman that's alone? Because I would start thinking about like, oh, am I even going to keep this baby alive for a year? I don't know what I'm doing. All those things that you think in the middle of the night. But those were kind of imaginary things. At the same time, I was beginning to realize that these were real fears for real people around the world and in my own country and in my own city. So that's like the spark that got me starting to read about problems, got me to say yes when somebody at my church asked me if I would write a letter to Congress about hunger. And that was like a springboard. And it would take me a couple of years to kind of figure this out. It would be another 2 years before I would go to Washington for the first time.
So thank you for sharing that. I have so many questions.
I guess you give me smaller bites.
Yeah, no. So first of all, as a breastfeeding mother myself, my sisters, I like to say I was raised by hippies, and my brother is no different, but he doesn't breastfeed. I really didn't really have a choice. It wasn't even in my wheelhouse to bottle feed. And I had premature births, so that was quite different. I had to pump. And in the NICU, they have to feed the baby a bottle. So I was in fear about the messages I was told about the difference between the bottle nipples and your own nipple and how that can screw up the baby and they'll never breastfeed and blah, blah, blah. So as a new mom, there's so much fear we have anyway. And then when feeding comes into play, whether we're successful at it or we're having difficulties with it, did anything come up for you in terms of guilt or anger towards yourself and your body for being unable to do what seems so natural for almost everybody else?
Well, if I had any guilt, it was just, I should have asked the question a couple days earlier. And it was like just knowing that my own stubbornness just made me think I was going to force my way through something. But I didn't think about that way about my body. And by the way, both of my kids, when I had the second one, I'm like, oh, this is definitely just something that happens with me because the exact same thing happened. Except I was quicker on the draw. And neither of my kids had any trouble accepting the nipple or the breast later.
Yeah. I don't know if that's a true thing or just like one of those things that breastfeeding advocates want to drill into your mind that the breast is best, obviously, but not everybody has the luxury to do it. And not everybody's milk does come in, right? And there's lots of nervous mothers or inverted nipple there's a whole host of ways and reasons why people cannot or choose not to breastfeed.
Lucky that here in the United States and where you live up in the Chicago area, I'm here in St. Louis, that we have a lot of advice all around us. Sometimes good advice,
sometimes too much.
But it's there. And I have the part of the story where I even had a medical professional that I could call at night. It was a service and, they forwarded it on, but I got what I needed. So that's, thinking back to that story is something that drives me now in the era that we are now where, Medicaid and, different health services are under attack, and thinking around the world where women might have to go, walk a day or two to get to a hospital that may or may not be open. These are the things that I think about, back how it felt for me to easily get something that should be available to everybody.
It should be. And we take what we have for granted until it's taken away. And just listen, I know you guys were here in Chicago initially, but you're in Missouri now. And it was not too long ago where friends of mine in Illinois were sharing posts about if you need to pitch a tent in my backyard, which is the euphemism for if you need to get an abortion, you can pitch a tent in my backyard because Missouri isn't letting you do it. Illinois is still. And so thinking about women having to, not just for abortions, but for any female health care, to have to drive out of your state and possibly not only get your doctor arrested or yourself thrown in jail just by seeking your own maternal care. It's scary shit. And it's so aggravating and angering. And before I get on any other road down that realm, two things: the CD and the song One Voice came to mind by the Waylon Jennings. Do you know that song?
I don't think so.
So it starts with one
Well,
voice, and then the other parts of the other members join in. It's a beautiful song, and I can link it in my show notes and I can send it to you. I played in yoga a lot with the sound of one voice, and it's beautiful. And I love the way that you said a chorus of caring. So maybe someday you'll write a book that has some songs sprinkled into it called Cindy's Chorus of Caring. I just wanted to throw that at you as an idea.
it'll be a collaboration, I think.
Okay. So when you started becoming an advocate, you've got one child at the time. Did you go to DC after your second one was born?
It was afterwards. And I have to say that when it was brought to me that maybe I'd want to go do this.
And what was it then that got you to DC the first time?
There's an organization called Bread for the World. And this year they're celebrating their 50th anniversary. So this gathering in DC is still going on. It's open to the public. So, somebody listening to this before June 9th could jump onto the wagon and head out there and talk about nutrition on Capitol Hill. So Bread for the World, one of the things that they're known for is they're a Christian organization. So they mobilize churches to do an offering of letters. Sometimes when we think about offering, think about money. But what they do is educate people about some aspect of hunger and then get people to write letters which are delivered to Congress by volunteers. So yeah, the organizer at my church, she was in her 80s and she was just starting to slow down and say, hey, I don't know if I want to do this. And she saw me be interested and she's like, you should go. And I say this to put it out there because like you gave me this wonderful introduction saying that I do all these things. I didn't always do all these things. So when this opportunity first came up, I had so many reasons. I had buckets of reasons that I couldn't do it. It's too expensive. And I have these two babies and we don't have childcare. And I've never done that before. And what I wasn't saying to her is, that's scary.
Yeah.
So all those things were true, but she was a lovely woman. Her name was Nancy. And she just listened to them and didn't argue with me, but she just started taking my reasons away from me. And one day she showed up at my door, which is so funny. My kids would think this is terrible. Like Gen Z does not like to be cold called. And like Gen X doesn't even like people to show up at the door unannounced. But here's this little lady and she had to check for $100. And she was like, I know that you said it was kind of expensive, but I was hoping this could help. And our church has air miles and stuff. And it's like, what do you say to that? Like,
yeah.
At that point, I felt like I was like ignoring a call from God. Like this is a woman from my house of worship.
A little angel came to your door with some money and said, none of your excuses matter. Do this. And you listened.
Yeah, it was one of the best things I ever did in my life because the other thing was, I think my husband got something out of it because I left for a couple of days and he hadn't been left alone with the babies, totally alone before. And that's a rite of passage for a father that probably should have happened before that point.
Yeah.
Of the mom going away for a couple of days. But he was working. This is, in all fairness, he was, the sole person in a company he just started. So, like I said, we didn't have childcare. So I had to be back by Monday. So I skipped the lobby day. So I got all this inspiration. I was like, wow, look at all these hundreds of people who came to Washington to say, feed hungry people, but I left before the best part. And I came home just thinking like, okay, I'm going to figure out a way to get back there. And I did eventually, but it really, sometimes you need a kick in the pants to get going on something.
Yeah. Well, the question I was going to ask you initially was, did you get any pushback from the family or your community? And the quote I love to use is, you're not crazy, you're just first. And so at the time that you decided to go or thought about going, I know you just said that your church was already doing this, but did anybody give you some pushback about, oh, you'll never get anything done? Why are you going to waste your time? Like those kinds of, Debbie Downers.
And I was lucky at that point not to. And my husband did not offer me pushback on that point. It was more like, how are we going to do it? It was more like logistical. The point in my life where that happened the most was on when I moved from Illinois to Missouri. And so that was about 2013. And at the time in Missouri, we had a Republican, Senator Roy Blunt, and we had Democrat, Senator Claire McCaskill. And as I would talk to people, Missouri has changed a little bit. We're a little more solidly red in our up and down the ticket. I'm represented by Republicans. But at that time, it was more mixed. And what I found was interesting is everywhere I go, when I would say, I'm an advocate and I'm going to start a results group, and Results is another advocacy group that I became engaged with. Almost everybody that I encountered would say, oh, if they were blue, they would say, you'll never get Roy Blunt to do anything. Mm-hmm. And if they were red, they'd say, you'll never get Claire McCaskill to do anything. And I thought that was so interesting that on both sides, they were just so adamant that nothing would happen. And, I just kept going. And it turned out that Claire McCaskill would do a lot for U.S. poverty issues, and Roy Blunt would do some very significant things for global poverty issues. So I got to see how it wasn't a binary kind of issue, and there were a lot of naysayers around me at that time. Fortunately, I was strong enough at that point that I was just like, wait, see.
Well, I want to get right there then, because I was going to come back to this. So, Josh Hawley.
All right.
You can see the look on my face and the tone of my voice. He is not my favorite person. However, part of me wonders if we've been fed in the media that he's not a good guy. I feel like he was instrumental in some things that didn't go so well for the country. And I've seen you standing next to him with pictures and advocacy.
The pictures, yeah.
So I would like to know, was that hard for you? Was it just what you do because no matter what people might say about some of these leaders, you really can get to what you need from them despite their political ilk? And how's it going?
Well, you ended that. I mean, what's going on right now? Yeah, the pictures, we should probably describe for the audio what was in those pictures. So there was a picture of me in 2022 when COVID was still a thing. The Capitol had just opened up. And there's a picture of me standing with my mask on because I'm like, I'm not taking my mask off for any of you people. And Josh Hawley was solidly in the no mask camp. So it's a very awkward picture of the two of us that if he were here right now, I would laugh with him about it because he looks like a cardboard cutout. And I'm just standing there with the mask in my eyes. My children can tell a lot by my face. It's like, I'm just looking really awkward and kind of like I want to leave. So that was the first time I ever met him in person.
What was the reason then, and how did that go?
Well, usually I'm up there for some sort of, and for all of these instances, I was in town in DC for an advocacy conference. Sometimes it's for the One campaign, which is global poverty, especially centered around Africa and development, or Shot at Life campaign, which is the shot referring to immunizations. It's global access to immunizations like measles and polio and more. So if you are in town, and this goes for almost everybody, you might look up on your Members of Congress webpage to see if they have a constituent coffee. Usually it's in the morning or in the afternoon. And it's a time when they just offer photo ops and talk to constituents. Up in Illinois, this was really unusual that Dick Durbin and Mark Kirk used to host them together. Bipartisan donuts.
Yeah. I'm waiting for the world to get back to that.
Yeah, it was actually a really pleasant time. But anyway, Josh Hawley would do these as well. They're very short, and usually you have just like a minute to say what you're going to. And if we want to talk about, there's all sorts of tactics that I love about how to like stretch out that time and stuff like that. And the next time I went to see him, I was like, how can I use this opportunity? Like I talk to his staff a lot. How can I use this opportunity to make myself memorable to him? Because my advocacy is often about the best times of my advocacy are about relationship building. It is almost impossible just to meet somebody who's on the other side of your issue and to change their mind in a minute. Like, that's really not going to happen. So I'm usually playing the long game of, what am I going to see the next time? I could just tell them off about all the things that I don't like going on. But here's the trick. I was up there for a One Campaign conference. And when you go to a conference with One, you are interacting with advocates that are from Nigeria or Ghana or, all these places where they don't know who Josh Hawley is. What they know is that their family members and their country people are suffering. And that's somebody who has the power to do something about it. And they don't have access to him. But I do, because I'm a constituent. And some of these places, like let's use Nigeria, for example, and I'm not a historian, but some of these countries have a long history of corruption. So when people say that they think this senator or that senator in the United
States,
is corrupt, I'm like, I'm not going to argue that point. But what I'm saying right now is like, these countries, these people know about corruption. But if I'm going to say I'm not going to engage and I'm not going to help you just because I think this guy's, I disagree with him, I'm not doing right by my colleagues. So I'm going to use that opportunity to talk to them. So here we go, describing the picture of the first one that I did when I kind of came to this revelation. It's like, I just went up there and I asked his aides first. I'm like, do you think he'd play rock, paper, scissors with me? And they're like, I don't know. No, don't ask him to do that, Cynthia. Don't, whatever. And I'm like, I'm just going to ask him. And so by the time I got to the front of the line, all the aides are like looking to see what he's going to do. And I was like, after we take the sort of stuffy formal picture, would you have a little fun with me? Would you play rock, paper, scissors? And I did share with him about whatever the issue was that I was talking about that day. But he's like, yeah, sure. And so the picture that most people comment on, for better or worse, is that we went rock, paper, scissors, shoot, and we both hit scissors. And there was this second that we both looked down at our fingers, and then we looked at each other in like surprise and delight. And it was just a weird moment with a senator of being like 5 years old.
Yeah. Yeah.
The room erupted with, oh, and he's like, honestly, he was a little confused. He's like, should we do it again? I was like, no.
Did you not know how to play the game?
Yeah. I said, well, he was want to know.
Like 2 out of 3, dude.
Because it's a game. Somebody wins. And I said, no, it's perfect because we agreed on that. It's like, oh, okay. And so, I just remembered what the issue was that we were talking about was PEPFAR, which is the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. It was started with George W. Bush. And I said, I've talked to your aide many times about it, and I wanted to make sure that we talked about it. And I said, do you know what it is? And he's like, oh, yeah, it's for AIDS relief. It's the best thing that George W. Bush ever did.
Okay.
Wow. So we did agree on that. So anyway, these things take baby steps, and I'm not his best friend. He doesn't call up. We don't go see Star Wars movies together like that. I disagree with a lot of things that he does, and he disagrees with a lot of things that I would. But some of these issues, that's what we need to talk about. And you asked, so what's happening now? How's it going? It's not going well for foreign aid. He was on the side of thinking that there was a lot of waste in USAID, which provides a lot of our foreign aid. And yet he did speak up after we talked to his office several times. He spoke up and said publicly in interviews, I agree with that, but what the president is doing is wrong because we need to legislate these things. And I'm like, oh, that's what I wanted you to say.
Yeah.
And then what happened after that is we were also talking about Medicaid, and he is one of the loudest voices on Capitol Hill supporting Medicaid right now.
Yeah, I saw your post about that. And here's why I bring this up, if I can just interject for a moment. We are in such a polarized world. And, whether you watch one news channel or all of the news channels, it's really fascinating because I do both. What we're getting fed by one network versus what we're getting fed by another. And the whole key is you found a road in through Switzerland, like a good advocate would, because you focus on the issue versus the name or the party, right? So you're there, just like you said, as not just an advocate for, yourself or whatever, but globally you're a representative for people that really do not have a voice. And if you got up there, like you said, and just said, I hate you, you're awful, or I love you, you're awesome, depending on with whom you're speaking, you're not being the best neutral advocate that you can be that really focuses on the issue at hand. And so you've learned, and we're going to get to your coaching, how to become that person. It takes a very grown up, mature person to set aside their personal beliefs in order to get inside the rooms where it happens. And I find that there's a lot of people stuck in, I'm not letting go of my personal beliefs or my disdain or disrespect for people. I won't deal with them. It's like you were told, like, you're not going to get this from Claire McCaskill. You won't get this from that guy. And you found out differently, right? And so it takes us, first we have to know ourselves and really what our platform is in terms of, my lens is the chakras, where we come from a solid base or not, is how then we're going to be a successful advocate or not. And it doesn't mean you have to have those coffees or play rock, paper, scissors with everyone. But if that's your way to get in the door, even if you dislike the person or their policies, you do it because you're a big person with a mission. So I love that about you. That's a really good lesson for people either just starting out trying to advocate or in the game now feeling very depleted and defeated. Stay the course and find a way in that is purple in whatever way you can.
Thank you for saying that. I will say that there are many people who share with me that they really do not agree with that standpoint. I'll also share that there are times when that is not enough. Like you are not going to change that person's mind on, any number of things. And that is when we do have to be partisan around elections. You can be independent, but you have to pay attention to that because right now, what we're seeing is an attack on so many social programs on so many fronts. I'm doing the best I can on certain ones, like Medicaid, we talked about, 408 is another one. But I do think, I want to be very clear on this, that there is a place for protesting and there's a place for civil disobedience. Like we would not have gotten the advancements in women's suffrage, civil rights, and all those things.
Anything.
Yeah, if we didn't do those things. So I do participate in protests from time to time, and I think it is important. I think that advocacy is a spectrum, and you need to figure out where to plug in, not just you, but
the plural, right?
To figure out where you are in that spectrum from, yelling in the streets to sitting down and building, person-to-person relationships. There's all sorts of in-betweens. There's calling, there's organizing, letter writing, there's writing for media. And if you can find a way to be true to yourself, then that's where you should be.
Right. And if you want to go stand on a soapbox and scream with a megaphone, and that's true for you, great. If you want to go stuff envelopes, that's true for you, great. The woo part of this right now that I want to bring up, because it's a good segue, is my mission is to connect with people like you on their mission. Because if we do not understand ourselves, if we do not know how we're made, so my tagline is, when you understand how your wheels turn, you drive your vehicle anywhere. So let's say, you are advocating like hell and you get a no and it's a failure. Do you then say that you are a failure? And if you don't have a good sense of self, you do, and you give up. If you are imbalanced in the other way, that you are right how I was raised and you're not letting go of it, and everybody else is wrong, and you're just going to keep being a bull in the china shop, that's another way to do it, but that's another imbalance, right? So my goal is to help people like your volunteers, the people that you're coaching to be good volunteers, to find their own set point, their own navigation system, because they're not always going to get the yes, they're not always going to get the no. And they've got to be okay no matter what, and be okay with who they are no matter what. And if they choose to have that donut with somebody from the other side and they get pushed back from their family or community and they give up and they stop, they're not doing themselves a service. They've lost their seat of their own personal power. So our energetic system really does factor into how we are better able to be not only global advocates, but just for our kids and for ourselves. And so, does that ever come up for you, like energetically? Do you have any woo woo practices before you walk into that room? Do you kind of set an intention? Is there anything? Do you smudge yourself after you walk out of a room? You know? My listeners, are you a little woo after all?
A ritual that involves a blood orange margarita after some of them.
That counts too.
No, I jest, but there's an element of truth in it. I recently had what I would say was my worst day on Capitol Hill in February. I was up there with the Shot at Life campaign. And if anybody has been following the USA foreign aid issue, first, the Trump administration said there was going to be a 90-day pause on the distribution of foreign aid, which means that people showed up trying to get their HIV medications and the doors were locked. And there's food rotting on docks. There's, medications, vaccines that needed refrigeration that were not moving. Horrible stuff can happen in 90 days. And I was on the Hill the day that the 90-day paused turned into 87% permanent cuts. And I was on the Hill with some very energetic newer volunteers that love them, but there were a lot of college students and newer volunteers who hadn't been around for the decades that I've been around to really internalize what does this mean. So that was a tough day of trying to, keep myself up and keep moving from office to office and do that thing. And when we got to the end of the day, I exited the building because the last meeting didn't go all that well. And they're like, "You want to talk about it?" Like, "You can't talk about anything in the Capitol." There are people, there are ears everywhere. But, I got outside and I started crying a little bit. And I didn't have the wherewithal to go to the next event to help the other advocates, the younger advocates. And that's where I just had to say, you know what, there's staff here and it's their job. And I went to the bar by myself and sat there with a margarita, and I texted a friend, and then she texted a picture of just a drink, and I'm like, "Are you by yourself?" Oh my God, are we both sitting here drinking in bars? So then we got together, and that was a long lead up to the point of my centering comes from being in community. So I had to reach out and be with that friend who has also been with me for those 20 years. And I don't think that I am terribly powerful without community. I think that a lot of people. So there's that, but I'll share with you. You asked if there's anything that I do to prepare. This is a lovely story that I probably only told once before. It was before a different Holly picture meeting. And I was going and I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to say this time. What am I going to do? Are we going to take a silly picture? How should I make the most of this moment? And I decided that to calm myself down, that I was going to pray. So I was doing walking prayer, walking meditation. I was walking to the Russell building in DC. And I was saying something like, "God grant me strength. God grant me courage. God grant me wisdom." And I was right in the middle of the street and I tripped and I fell and I ripped up my hands and I scuffed up the tip of my shoe. And I don't know how this happened, but I was bleeding on my knee without my pants being ripped. I'm not sure how that happened.
Wow.
And I was like, how about God grant me humility? Because that's what I just got right there. And it's I think it was, I took it as a sign to just not take myself so seriously because I was trying to memorize some talking points and think about how I was going to really make the most of it. And so I was just go in there and be your dorky self that just fell down in front of all these people.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that's centering myself. Maybe I should be still.
I always say, and you've probably heard me say this before, don't shit on yourself, first of all. And second of all, I love the beauty of that story. It is, you showed up in authenticity. We are all, if we're really human and admit that we're human, lovely, we're ridiculous, we're silly, we take ourselves way too seriously, and then we don't. And we show up hopefully somewhere in the middle. And however we can find that center, that's the deep well from where we really can make a difference.
Honestly, I think that moment helped me just jerk out of that and be like, you're fine with what you do.
Yeah, I mean, it happens, when before COVID, if I would go to the gym and I wasn't feeling 100% or show up to yoga class and not be 100%, you're really just surrendering to the present. Like you're just taking each moment as it's coming because you're not necessarily on your game. And so that's really just what you described. You just kind of just God said, okay, we're going to give you something now. Here you go. And now how are you going to show up? And
Not
so
what you're asking for, but
yeah,
it's what you need.
right. Of course, it's like the song, can't always get what you want, but you get what you need. All right. First of all, you're in DC a lot. So my question is, as possibly a budding advocate, are you invited to go or sometimes you just show up or both?
So I will always go with a group, like with an organization. If you just go yourself, you may not have access to those meetings. And when people ask me, it's like, oh, how should I get started? I don't even know. I read your book and whatever. I'm like, well, read that part again about how I think that it is really the best thing you can do is to hook yourself up with an organization that cares about the same thing that you do and has been working on it. Like, don't start from scratch. If you are just Laurie showing up and you're like, I would like a meeting, they're just like, hey, get in line. But if I show up with, let's use Bread for the World for an example again, just because they're a 50-year-old organization, or results, you can see the number results.org. They're a 40-year-old organization, or care.org. They've been like providing care packages since World War II. These are big known names, and they can kick those doors open for me, and sometimes in ways that I can't. So that's really helpful. The other thing is when I go to those conferences, it's not just the lobby day. You have workshops that teach you the skills, a lot of which are covered in my books, but it's good to learn them in practice with others. You get the skill building, you get inspiration from them because they were always going to build in, like bringing in stories of people who are directly impacted by the programs. And the last thing that I absolutely love is they give you updates on what is happening up to the moment. In fact, Shot at Life will bring in a Republican and a Democrat, like people who have worked on the Hill, to talk about what is going on right now. So what is on their minds that's not your issue, so you know where they're coming from. Anyway, you get like all of that together, plus people to help you figure out how to navigate the Hill, because it's not that obvious sometimes. And that's why I go for these. And to answer your question, sometimes I'm invited because I'm an advocate who's been doing it a long time, and I've proven to, I'm
get shit done.
Thank you. There's that. And I've also put myself out there to be a coach to others.
Right. So let's talk about that. Talk about your volunteer coaching.
Oh, I just want to say, so some are like that, but like the Bread for the World one is open to the public. So there are some that are open to everybody. If you just, paid $50, they'll welcome you with open arms. And the coaching, what would you like to know about the coaching?
Well, so it's just like what you're saying. So if I pay $50 and I show up, what do I do? Like, how do I know what to do? Right? Like, do you help people? It seems to me that you're coaching people how to be great volunteers. So what exactly does that comprise?
Usually when I'm doing my coaching, I'm coaching on specific skill sets. Like if, for instance, there's a Hispanic organization in St. Louis that wants me to come talk about, they want me to tell my story a little bit, but then they also want me to talk about how do you craft a message. And the PTA has brought me in to talk about how do you write a letter to the editor. So usually I'm doing specific skills like that. And at the end of almost every one of my outreach meetings, when I'm like saying join results or join one, we'll do like a call to Congress and we'll have a script up there and I'll demonstrate how to do that. So that is usually what I'm doing within my groups that I'm involved in. Sometimes when I have, if I'm up at Shot at Life or, here in my local group, sometimes I'm taking volunteers under my wing to say, to just what you said, like, okay, so you called and you asked, and they said no. What are we going to do next? We're going to get 10 people to call with us, or we're going to get 50 people to write letters with us. Still got the no? Well, now we're going to try a different tactic. And I want to be the person to help other folks the way that results staff helped me when nobody showed up to my first outreach meeting. There was a meeting Yeah, it was called Stand Up for Poverty. And I invited people and I made brownies and guacamole and stuff, and nobody came. And at the end, when they said, everybody stand up, I just laid down on the couch. I was so sad. And I was really glad that I had people at that organization to say, hey, that happens. Let's move on. Talk about what we can do next time. You hold it in a different venue, or can you start your inviting early, or can you work with a friend so that they're inviting too? That's the kind of thing that I do for others.
Well, and it sounds like part of your bio too, you've leveraged your role as mother and that skill set to build skills for what you're doing now. And so, like I asked you at the very beginning, do you recall taking sort of a look at what you're doing as a mother and saying, hey, I can really use these skills? And I'd like you to mention a few of them that you do find connect from motherhood to advocacy, because that is part of what you do. And that's what we do as teachers, and as moms, we take what we know, we explain it as we go. And I'd love you to sort of talk about that.
We'll talk about it a little bit. And I don't know if you've been to or not, but that is the core part of my whole first book, From Changing Diapers to Changing the World. There's a lot of ways that moms and teachers and caregivers have characteristics that translate to advocacy. I pull out 5 of them because I just think that these 5 are the most natural. And one of them is what you just mentioned, is that we are experts in explaining things. I like to say that if you can explain something to a second grader, you can explain something to a member of Congress.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not because they're dumb. It's just that if you could explain it to a second grader, that, were we 8 years old at that time, you just need to be very clear. Mm-hmm. And members of Congress are busy. And, it just happened that somebody left a message on my phone that I picked up just before we did this podcast. And the message was, yeah, I want to talk to you for some political advice because you know who is taking back funding for, and there was a whole bunch of letters.
Yeah.
No idea what she's talking about. So I have to call her and find out. Yeah. But I think that's when I went to talk to Josh Hawley about PEPFAR, I couldn't assume that he knew what that acronym was.
Oh, yes. Thank you for saying that. I will not say who, but it refuses to use regular time. Every time I'm trying to make a date with this person, it's military time. And I have said 45,000 times, I don't speak that language. Can you speak in my language? Or there's acronyms thrown into something that I'm supposed to know what the fuck that is. And you know what? It pisses me off because I have made my boundaries very clear. And I've said, I don't speak that language. Can you please speak in a way I understand? Now, from the other side, he or she could say, screw you. I'm doing what I'm doing. And you've got to figure it out. But I find if you're really trying to collaborate and you're really trying to make a connection with people, then listen to what they need. And if it's really no skin off your back, give it to them. But if your chakras are screwed up and you're raised to feel like intelligence is value, then you're never going to dumb your message down to an 8-year-old level, no matter what. And you know what? That's not going to get you very far in terms of getting what you want, because you're not going to really find people receive you as well as you'd like.
Yeah. And this is a tricky thing. It's like, how do we show up to a congressional meeting feeling the righteous anger that we feel about the injustices and the oppression going on, and not necessarily suck up to the other person, but to meet them where they can hear your message? And I got an education on this when I was on the Hill, that I was just like, we're practicing. That's another thing you do when you're at a conference, is you get a moment to practice your message before you go in the next day. And I was kind of using some language that I used before. And I used the word equity in talking about global vaccines. And there was somebody on staff that stopped me for a second. He's like, I'm not saying that you're wrong, but we've had a shift up on the Hill right now. And I just wanted to let you know that you might not be heard in the way that you want to if you use the word equity, because diversity, equity, inclusion are becoming such taboo words. And I was really offended at first. It's like, equity, it's just a word. But then I thought about it. It's like, well, can I say access for everyone who needs it? Not to the person, but I was thinking that to myself. And then that's what I used in the meeting, because if that's going to help me get through in the 30 seconds that I have, then that's what I should do in that moment. And to be strong enough to be like, well, I'm just going to remessage, because that's what I do all the time is remessage for the platforms I'm talking to.
I just had to look this up because when you said the word equity, I remembered a few years ago, there was a meme or a photo that was going around between the difference between equality and equity with the fence.
Yep.
What's interesting is just looking at it, equity is everybody gets a different height box so everyone can see over the fence. But equality is everyone has a box and not everybody gets to see over the fence. So I find it fascinating that the word equity was the trigger point when that really is creating equal access for everyone's needs to get what everyone needs. That's really sad to hear.
It is.
Yeah.
It's not convenient for us to change our language. It's not comfortable. And it's not fair that we have to change language. And yet, if I want to be heard in my small window that I've got, and I said 30 seconds because when you go into a meeting, you're sharing the meeting. Like I might be going in with 4 other advocates and I want them to speak as well. So we each have our own parts. So I didn't want you to think that I was just...
No. What's connecting for me too is in terms of business, we talk about the elevator pitch. You're going to get in the elevator with the CEO. You got 30 seconds in that elevator. What's your pitch? And in the same way as moms, sometimes you got 30 seconds in that car between school pickup line and the next thing. And what's your pitch? Like, how are you going to make the most impact in the time you have with your kid, whatever that time is? And so as moms, we do practice those elevator pitches way more than we think we do.
Oh, yeah.
And so I love that your book really does help people connect in the language we can understand as moms. My role is to niche up my stuff for moms and women and CEOs and everything, because everybody has chakras, right? And so the way we connect on what we're doing and the way that we do it is beautiful. I want to use this time at this point to talk about a couple of things. If you had to say what your biggest win or wins has been so far and what your largest challenge has been so far, what comes up for you?
Well, I think we're in the largest challenge right now. Like I've been doing this, like we said, for a couple of decades, but there are people that have been doing it for much longer than I have. Nobody's seen anything like this, where we're actually having to convince members of Congress to use their own power. Like I'm usually talking to moms and trying to talk them into their power. And here I am going to Congress and hearing effectively like, well, we don't know what to do. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, scary. It's really scary and maddening.
Yeah. So it's like finding effective ways to say, do the job that you're constitutionally empowered to do. So yeah, I've never seen a time like this where like I am really out there saying to use every avenue open to us, including mass protests. And by the way, I think America and me as well, I think we are not well practiced. I think we have forgotten how to protest.
Yeah. I think there's fear around it by design that if you protest, you might get, hurt or arrested but guess what? That was happening in the 70s and it didn't stop them from protesting things back then.
The people that haven't forgotten it are the marginalized communities, like the LGBTQ communities, Black communities, and we should be listening to those leaders to teach us what we forgot or, as individuals never learned. So that kind of got off the sidetrack.
No, but that's challenging too. The challenge is so much. Astrologically, we're in a time period that none of us have seen, just astrologically. Neptune's moved into something it hasn't been in 165 years. So, the woo part of all of this as well, there's no accident that we're all feeling very powerless and untethered because we are dealing with a lot of energy none of us has ever dealt with before. And you can pick a category and it's just falling apart no matter where you look. And then, anyway, so I just digressed and I forgot my own train of thought.
What is the biggest win? And I can talk about a series of events that happened when I moved here to Missouri. We referenced that a little bit. And my Congresswoman, Ann Wagner, was a fairly new Congresswoman, and nobody knew where she really stood on things. And I didn't even have a results group around me. I didn't have any other people, so I did go in there by myself and said, this is the organization I'm with. And here's a bunch of issues that we work on. I said to her aides, is there one that she's particularly interested in? And not really so much. So she wasn't doing a lot on global issues, but just persistence over time, which is another one of those characteristics that moms and caretakers and teachers are really good at, is persistence. We just going back in there and being regular visitors. Sometimes I heard somebody just refer to it when I was at a conference. They said, oh yeah, the staff, they always know who the frequent flyers are. And you're trying to walk the line between being a frequent flyer and a kook.
Yeah.
Like who do you see showing up regularly? That's also reasoned and interested in having conversations. So it was just that persistence. But there was one particular thing called the Reach Every Mother and Child Act. It was a maternal child health piece of legislation. And I'm like, we had been making progress and I saw no reason why she shouldn't be on it. And I just said, we're going to try something different. And so I started working with Girl Scout groups, and we got hundreds of Girl Scouts to write letters, and we made paper chains of dolls. And Valentine's Day came up, and I sent a particular aide a glitter bomb.
Okay.
It was a heart that said something about the Every Mother and Child Act, and it had glitter on it. So of course I know when he opened it, it was all over his desk, and he thought about us for a long time. But it was after all that she finally signed on. And it was just, I felt really good that this is what I mean by crafting another approach and another way is, be the mom. Just go ahead and be that person. And I would lobby with my kids. And I think sometimes that bringing the creativity and the fun and the unorthodox way of just not being a lobbyist in a suit makes everybody more human and open to the messages.
And now it's time for Joy on the 5. So, Cindy, you were just getting very joyful in what you were just saying. And earlier today, I gave you some homework because sometimes I spring this on my guests and sometimes I give them homework. So I'd ask you to set an alarm today a few times at 5 minutes to the hour to see what was coming up in terms of joy for you. I'd love you to share.
The first thing I'm going to say is plans with friends. I think I don't see my friends enough, and we have just bought a little tiny trailer. And so I drive it up to Wisconsin. And for the first time in years, I am going to do a LARP. If you don't know what that is, the live action role playing. It's based on things. And we're going to run around the woods as Lord of the Rings characters, acting according to a point-valued system. And we're going to have a battle of good versus evil in the middle of Wisconsin woods. And planning that and thinking about it was bringing me joy at the moment when my alarm went off. So yeah.
That's awesome. Oh my God. That's conjuring up so many movies in a good way.
I have so many questions about that.
Like Hunger Games comes to mind. I hope not.
Yeah, this is like a piece of advice because advocacy is very disheartening sometimes when you're not winning. But yeah, I encourage everybody to have different hobbies and some ridiculous hobbies that nobody else really understands except maybe you and your friends.
Well, it's the joy. It's cultivating joy where you can find it, how often you can find it. So what was the next alarm that went off for you?
I had a memory because my former Congresswoman, Jan Schakowsky, we saw the announcement come through that she is not going to run for Congress again. So I was thinking about things that have happened in the past, and I just got a big smile on my face thinking about dancing with her just out on the dance floor there was a inauguration party for President Obama in Evanston, and we were dancing to Cyndi Lauper's Girls Just Want to Have Fun. That's so silly. That was a moment of advocacy and relationship building too.
Yeah. Oh, wow. You have fun. So what else?
I was outside when it went off one time, and it is just gorgeous, sunshiny weather that when we're done here, I'm going to go out and be in it. we've had a lot of rain lately, and that's joyful right there. And then the other thing that I wrote down is that I was smiling because, like many families that have kids at college, we have a family group chat. And one kid is taking exams today and posted, and the rest of the family just like piled on with like funny memes and, stuff that maybe she didn't want.
Yeah.
It brought us joy.
Exactly.
Well, sorry, she's suffering through that calc test, but it was funny for us.
Yeah, those are bonding moments. Oh, I love that you shared all of that. And I know you've got two amazing daughters who are young, budding advocates in their own right. And my lovely cousin, your husband, is doing his own global woo-woo thing on his own. And you've got a really fascinating, beautiful family. And the uniqueness that you bring to our family is tremendous. And what's interesting is it's just par for the course with how the Fleischmans, the Levins, and everybody else roll, right? We're not the cookie cutter people by any stretch of the imagination.
And I don't think that was very cookie cutter. So,
and I love that about all of us in our own individual way. We have, LGBTQ, parts. We've got the hippie parts. We've got the, buttoned up
we're
members
all the
of the family
parts over here.
We've got the whole spectrum of wonderful colors going on. And I feel that really is a blessing, truly. I'd love you to talk about more of your blessings. I know you have a second book coming out and some things coming up. So before we, cut our time here, I would just love you to plug anything you'd like.
Oh, thanks. So we talked about my first book is called From Changing Diapers to Changing the World, Why Moms Make Great Advocates and How to Get Started. And if we're showing visuals, there is the book cover. And it comes in 3 parts that talks about like the case for, like we talked about, the 5 reasons that, characteristics that make us great advocates. It talks about my journey and stuff like that. The second part is more like, what's in it for you? Like, what do you get out of it when you're an advocate? The empowerment, the sense of identity. And the third part is called Advocacy Made Easy. That has the instructions on how to, like I talked about, how I coach people. This is the step-by-step instructions on how to write media, how to call Congress, how to write your handwritten letters, and even how to get the meeting and have a lobby meeting. But I felt like this book was great. It was released in 2013, but I looked around me and thought, what we really need is just that Advocacy Made Easy part as a handbook.
I was just going to ask you, are you making an ebook?
Yeah, this is on, you can buy this as an ebook, but the other one will be hardcover and an ebook. And I asked my publisher, and we're still working on this. It's like, can we make sure that it's like costs like $10, $12 tops? I want it to be affordable. And love my moms, love my mommy people, but I'm stripping out all the parenting stuff just to make it very streamlined and for a general audience. So here's the plug. That is called Advocacy Made Easy, the handbook for turning civic frustration into powerful action. That will be coming out sometime this summer. I don't have the launch date yet. But here's the thing. You don't have to wait for that information. It's in this book if you want to buy it, From Changing Diapers to Changing the World. Or you can visit my website at www.changyit.com. and go to my blog there called Advocacy Made Easy. And you can see it has like how-to blogs. And all this information is there. I don't want cost to be a barrier to people taking action. The reason I'm launching the book is to, generate interest to it. It can be a gift you can give to people and things like that. But anybody who's like, financially strapped or something like that, you can get this online. So visit my website. You can see that blog there. You can get those resources and also sign up for my monthly Substack that will keep you up to date on my monthly newsletter. Sorry, get all these things mixed up.
It's on Substack, yeah.
Yeah, the monthly newsletter will tell you like all the updates of when this new book is coming out and how to get it. But both there are available on Barnes & Noble, Amazon. You can order it at independent bookstores, or you can get an autographed copy from me from my website.
Yeah, I'll put all that in the show notes. And then you had mentioned before we got started, there's a couple of events for advocacy coming up.
So if this comes out before June, like I said, June 9th is the Bread for the World conference, the summit in Washington, D.C. It is a Christian organization, but that is open to all. And there's a lot to learn, even if that is not your religious persuasion. It's a way in, and there's a lot of good information there. The other event coming up, I would say, is the next day of mass protests is June 14th. It seems to have a No Kings theme. And just look in whatever your local social media channels are for what might be near you, because I can't speak to what that would be.
Yeah. All right. I'm just going to plug myself a little bit because I don't do enough of that. And I did talk about what I do is help people understand themselves. So if you're interested in getting into the advocacy game and you're finding that you don't know how to use your voice or your creativity and other elements that really do help you become a really good advocate without losing yourself in the process, please reach out to me. And I can be found at www.customdesignedwellness.com. And my links are in the show notes as well. But my whole mission is to help people understand they matter. And I know as an advocate, it's sometimes hard to feel that way when you're getting a no or a door slammed in your face, but you still matter just for showing up. And so I appreciate everything you're doing. I appreciate everything you're helping other people do. And anybody who is standing on a soapbox or stuffing an envelope or licking a stamp, I appreciate everything everyone is trying to do to make this world a better and more unified and peaceful place. So, Cindy, I love you so much and give everyone in my family hugs that are there or at school, and good luck to the calculus child. And we'll talk again soon.
Thank you.